Good evening, good day, good morning, good night, and cheerio and hello. All of these things actually are talking about change because we're changing the time that we say things. So we're going to be talking about change for growth today. Is that an evolutionary thing? Who knows? Let's find out. Before we do, let's introduce ourselves. Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela and I work with people who have just got to that point they're feeling a bit scunnered, and I'm using the Scottish word. They've maybe not really got where they want to get to in life, or they've got fed up of not being listened to and not being heard, and they're in a lot of pain and things aren't shifting for them. So that's who I love working with. And I use kinesiology, hypnotherapy and coaching to help that happen.
Really?
I'm Mary Quartett. I'm based out in Ireland, and I'm a coach who likes helping people to get and supporting people to get clarity, to take action, and to get where they want to go. Because I always want them to be good to go.
It's always good to go somewhere,
Always
to
good
be
to go.
going somewhere.
Yeah.
Tanys.
I'm Tanys Coughlan from Twillo Lifestyle Community, Twillo Lifestyle Academy. I am an intuitive energy healer and a coach, and I help people to find their spiritual path and follow it and find that joy within.
Willie.
Good evening, I'm Willie. I'm the cop turned coach, helping people with professional and personal growth through mindset change, that word again. I predominantly work with men who are sick and tired of feeling stuck or lost. I help them find solutions to what's holding them back or stopping them get the results they want. In short, I help them get their life back on track and rediscover their mojo.
Mojo. There you go. There's a change. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jurkofsky with My Holistic Self, also with Twillo Lifestyle with Tanys there. I'm a registered psychotherapist. I'm a Canadian certified counselor, an intuitive life coach, energy healer, and I love to work with clients on their spiritual journey, dealing with and processing through the challenges and things that they hold on to, helping them to let those things go so that they can move along their journey in the direction that feels correct for them.
And I'm Leslie Marsh, and I never know what to say at this point. But let's just say that I deal with holistic nurturing of self and of your business to a certain extent. Because if you're not nurturing yourself, you're not doing yourself any favours. You're not doing anybody you work with any favours either. So it's a start. But it's also something that evolved. It changed from becoming a storyteller and all the way through all little machinations. So it just had its own little beastie properties and became this kind of thing. And it happens that way sometimes. Change creeps up on us, and we don't sometimes realise it's even happening. What do you reckon, Mary?
I think that's a very important point because I have a lot of contact with young adults who are they're finishing college and they're growing and developing. And if you'd ask them a question about are they changing, they'd look at me like I'd 10 heads. So I sometimes think the language we use around growth and change and learning can actually help us to manage ourselves much more effectively. So I think we need to pay attention to the language we're using and is it serving us? Because oftentimes we want to grow, but we might be calling it learning, but we're still growing.
It's true though, isn't it, Willie? You change one word, even just changing one word sometimes, the whole meaning of the sentence of the thing that you're doing changes. What do you think, Willie?
I agree. Language is very important. I have certifications in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which sounds very scary, but it's just really the appropriate use of language. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So the weather here in Scotland has been absolutely appalling. Very high winds, torrential rain. But today the weather changed. Winds not so high and the rain stopped. So that's just one example of a change over which we have no control. However, we do have control over certain things. I'm reminded of the line from the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the grace to accept what I can't change. Give me the strength to change what I can, and give me the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And I'm kind of, extrapolating here. And that is, acceptance is a very powerful thing. We can't change the weather, much as I'd like to, because my TV aerial blew away, but that's another story. I've now got a new one. We can't change things we can't change, and we have to accept that with as much grace as we can. But what we can change, we need to have the self-discipline, strength, whatever you want to call it, to go and do it. So I think a lot of people are change averse. They don't like change. They're content to stay in their wee bubble or their comfort zone, that well-hackneyed phrase, because it's safe. It is comfortable. But unless we embrace change, we're never going to go anywhere. So I have changed. I used to be a detective, an undercover officer, and I was very logical, analytical, and dare I say, cynical. But I've changed immeasurably since I started coaching. I'm now much more open to alternative theories and suggestions. So I am living proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks. A leopard can change its spots, and change is inevitable.
Yeah, being a cynical person myself, I used to say, people used to say to me, why can't you be more positive? I say, okay, I'm positive, it's not going to work. Jennifer.
Oh, I love it. Change, it's one of those things that we conceptualize, and that concept of it is scary, but the reality of it is beautiful, right? And to what Willie was saying, that idea of, how we notice our own changes. I actually talk about, experiences in my own life that are past life experiences, right? They're past this life experiences, because that person is so different in one stage, then in another stage, then in another stage. And I can actually see these, really important changes that happened in my own experience that really brought me into a whole other way of being. And those times that they have happened, we're talking about more of like those macro changes, right? But then there's these micro changes that are happening all of the time. And I think that, when we think about change and the fear that comes up with change, we also have to look at control, right? Like what Willie was saying too, like spheres of control, what is within my power and what is outside of my power, and really being able to honor that. And, to Mary's point, how we narrate our own experience really does dictate how we feel, right? I always say, our perception definitely defines our reality. And so the way that we choose to narrate our story is very much going to impact the way that we associate change in our experience, and how we either allow or deny, resist that.
I'm thinking Alice in Wonderland right now, because basically there's two big things there. It's like, I can't be the person that I was yesterday because I'm different today. And then there's the Cheshire Cat. Doesn't matter if you don't know where you're going, you'll get there, whichever, you'll end up somewhere. But it's the control aspect of it, and the idea of being in control of change. Tanys, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I often talk to my clients about the spiritual journey being one of learning, because every time we learn something, we change and we grow. And if that's the case, then we are a different person every day, because every day we learn something new, even if it's the tiniest thing. We talked about the micro, Jen was talking about micro versus macro, and, the micro changes that we make on a daily basis can really impact down the road, and we may not realize it. So every day we learn something, and every day we become a new person in some way. So we are on a growth path, whether we want to look at that as human beings or not. We tend to think that, I think the fear comes from not knowing what's ahead, because really we're all changing, we're all growing regularly. So that's like something that we're used to. But when we stop to think, where am I going? And I don't know what the end result of this change will be. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck in the fear about what's going to happen, right? So I'm not sure if it's really all of the change itself that's scary, or whether it's, what does that mean going forward? kind of thing. So
Yeah,
we do the micro change all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea of when people are really, really trying hard to stay in one place and to do anything to just remain dogmatically in one place. What do you reckon, Angela? That's when problems arise, yeah?
Yes and no. It depends. My favourite answer. I think that there's a comfort and a safety to not change. But are we really living if we're not changing? Our cells are constantly regenerating and dying and starting again and changing. And that's just a part of us. So on some teeny tiny level, we are changing. And exactly as Tanys was saying, we've learned something new. We've done something different. We've experienced something else. We've eaten something different. Life is constantly changing. If we didn't change, we wouldn't be able to walk. We would still be wearing nappies. We would still be relying on other people to feed us every day. We've gone through those changes already. So anything else should be quite easy from that perspective because we've done the hard stuff. All those things we did as babies and as teenagers and as children and everything else, we've gone through that massive amount of change. We've gone from being that high to the height we are now. All these things are changes. And yes, okay, Leslie, you've not really changed that much in height, but that's okay. We still like you.
I'm getting shorter.
So there's another change. And I think if we don't embrace it and if we don't accept it, then are we really living?
Now I feel like a bit of a homunculus, but never mind.
A what now?
What I wonder though is because sometimes I think, and this is coming back to that point about language, like if we think of the child growing up, the growth bit we're really comfortable with and mastering, but the concept we have about what change is, we seem to get uneasy about. So when we focus more on growing, whether it's physical maturation or going to school or becoming professional or whatever that growth piece is, we don't focus on the changing, we're focusing on the growth. And that somehow, if we look at it, seems to be easier. Whereas when we focus on change, we seem to create this psychological construct that has fear attached to it.
I wonder where that came from. Has that come from the business perspective? Has that come from our political leadership? Where has that, do you think, that concept or that stuckness on the word change has come from?
I think using the political and that other word in the one sentence is an oxymoron, right? Don't get me started on politicians, but when I've grown, my waistband has grown because I'm old and fat. My hairline is thinner, right? That used to be, I used to have a full head of very curly hair. So that is an obvious example of change. We all change. But a refusal to accept that change is inevitable will keep you stuck. You will not grow. And if you don't grow, you stay static. Now, I like to think I've grown as a person, as a human being in my journey through coaching. And I'm still aspiring to become better. But that's through learning of whatever it happens to be. But that's just me. Other people, I think, are quite happy with the status quo. As I said before, they're reluctant to embrace change, to accept change. Change is a scary thing. And that's, as Tanys says, where the fear comes in. FEAR, false expectations appearing real. We've made it up in our head. We're afraid of the change. We've made a wee story up and said we can't do that. The negative self-talk is what keeps us stuck. Not maybe so much the fear of change, it's, oh, I can't do that. Well, that'll never work. My goodness, I'm going to crash and burn here. Well, I'll just stay where I am. That is a decision. If you made that decision, that's a decision. Is it a good decision? I'll leave that up to you to make your mind up.
I must admit, it kind of snuck up behind me and bit me on the bum. It was a case of I always realised that there was possibility I was suffering from arrested adolescence. I was walking down a street in London at one point and then suddenly realised that I was an adult because I'd just done something extremely adult. And I thought, is that it? Like, am I now not allowed to do silly things anymore? And I think that part of it has got to do with what we identify as, how we identify in the space that we're in, and what we want to do and how we want to do it. And I think that also there's a lot going on, particularly with clients coming in who don't understand that it doesn't matter that they don't know now who they're going to be beyond the change, but they will still be themselves, just a bit more, not less than, because they've already garnered all the experience and things that have been going on. You get more experience and you can kind of lodge it away and file it, forget about it. But every so often it'll come up and say, hello, do you remember me? We used
It's
to do
funny.
this.
It's funny that you bring up the not being able to do any childhood things, you know, once you're an adult. I had a hard time turning 25 because I realized, oh, I'm supposed to act like an adult now. I don't know if I want to do that. It was a bit of an early life crisis because of those constructs that I had in my mind, that just like you say, I have to like be responsible and do that kind of adulting thing. I'm not allowed to play anymore. And I fought with that for a little bit, and then I was like, that's not true. But I don't know where the construct came at that age, but you know, when you're 25, you're young and you have these ideas that get brought in. So I had like a young life crisis instead of a midlife crisis because I thought I couldn't play.
That old adage that says that life begins at 40. I said if it didn't begin at 40, I wanted my money back, and I'm still waiting for my money back.
I really love that. You reminded me of one of my, when I first went into, I guess, one of my first major career positions. And I was in my early 20s, and I remember walking down the street into the office from, after parking, and just kind of looking around and thinking, how on earth did I get here? Like,
Yeah.
I still feel like such a little kid, and I still want to jump in that puddle, and I still want to do all of these things. And, how on earth did I get to this place of, dealing with these programs and dealing with this, population that I'm working with and all of this stuff, and thinking like, wow, like there is change, and there is also this kind of consistency of who I am that is going to emanate through each of the different things. Like there's going to be parts of my experience that are just going to always be part of who I am, and I can embrace those and still allow space for change in other areas. And I think that being able to have both of those aspects can also help balance that fear sometimes, right? And being able to stay in that place.
I found myself saying the other day to somebody a young person, a very young person, who said that they were just about to panic and die because they'd lost an earring. And I said, well, it doesn't really matter if you panic or not, because the result will be the same. You'll either get the earring or you won't. Nothing will change that way. And the look she shot me was absolutely amazing. And I thought, yeah, I remember that look. I've given it a few times. But it's one of those things that on the other side of that mirror you're sort of looking at, it's a very strange thing to realize, to stand there and to actually be in, like, in quantum space, quantum position, in meta position, that you're saying, okay, I remember being that person and I can see and understand that person, but I'm also now this person who knows what's going on there. How do I put the two together? Because if we're saying that we have to change to grow, can anything grow without change?
Well, if you look at plants, they start off as a seed, and then the water and nutrition of the soil, and then they become a sprout, and then they become whatever else. Or is it bamboo that sits dormant for 5 years and in the space of 10 weeks goes 50 foot tall?
Yeah,
Is
some
that
of them are like that.
That's one hell of a change, right? When, I don't know, animals are born, they're tiny. When humans are born, they're tiny, and they end up whatever size they end up. So the concept of change is all around us. I'm thinking what Jennifer said there is, what sprung to mind was, if you're comfortable in your own skin, if you're at peace with yourself, if you're at ease with yourself, you can navigate all these changes. maybe sometimes less favourably than others, depending on the extent of the change. But if you're okay with yourself, which comes down to self-image and self-perception and self-awareness, and realise that, okay, this is a bit of a challenge, this is a bit of a change, but hey, I've managed change before, I've managed challenges before, I can do it again. I have that history of managing my own change or changing my life, or the challenges that come with growth, and I can do it again. It's having the ability to say, yeah, okay, did that, managed it okay, I can do it again in the future with virtually anything that comes my way. And if I want to grow, I have this background, this knowledge, I am capable of changing, I'm capable of growing because I've done it in the past.
That's the thing though, do we know if we don't, some change, let's face it, if it's inevitable, we don't really see it coming. And it suddenly happens, things happen, and we kind of ride the wave. We go on that wave and we kind of ride it. We get to the other side, but we don't know how we quite how we did it. And that's the thing. If we don't know how to do it by the numbers, is that where the fear comes in? Because we did it by accident beforehand. Angela, what do you think?
I love happy accidents like that. The ones that you don't know what's happened, you don't know how you've got there, but you know what? I can get used to this. It's quite a nice place to be. Do we need to have control of everything? Do we need to know by the numbers what's going to happen? There's a sense of security and safety in knowing that. But if we actually really look back at our lives, there'll be many, many times where we weren't in control. We weren't taking every single decision that got us from A to B or to C or to wherever we ended up. And we have just had to go with the flow. And there's magic in that. There's so much joy in just going with it. Yes, you do sometimes want to stick your oar in and move your direction if you're heading towards something you really don't want. But on the whole, just enjoy the journey of life, right?
Well, take your hand off the steering wheel, let go of the wheel, see what happens.
Maybe not if you're in a high-powered car.
It's
Good point.
interesting because in human design, we talk about being the passenger consciousness, right? And allowing the mind to take the passenger seat and letting that higher self, spiritual energy, that part of us is supposed to be the driver. So we need to take our hands off the wheel and allow that guiding force within us to take over, where the mind and all of the conditioning and all of the things that we've experienced in our past that we filter everything through now, that limits the possibilities. And so if we can let that part of us take the passenger seat, right, and just become the observer of what's happening, wow, like the amount of things that we can embrace in that position just, grows exponentially.
I was wondering about the going by the numbers goal setting situations, where when people are attempting to make the changes that they want to see in life, and they're being told, oh, if you do it this, and this, you'll get that definitely. And it doesn't always work for them. Mary, what do you reckon on that one?
I spent quite a bit of time working with people with career goals, and it's very focused about where's the career you want to get to, and there's the path and there's the learning strands. But I do find it's much more interesting that you need to keep telling them in broad strokes, where do you want to be? We won't get down into the specifics so that there is a flexibility, that they're not rigidly stuck. Because if they rigidly stay on a goal and a path, it may work for them. I don't doubt some very clear goal focused, action driven people, they get to the goals. But I think the people who have a little bit more fluidity in the goal but yet bounded, that they're striving, that they're trying to move in the general direction, I think they have a much more interesting life. And they're
Yeah.
open to opportunities that if they stay rigid, they miss, because they won't be aware of them. They won't pay attention to the possibilities. Oh, I can try this. Like I actually, a really good example this morning, I was talking with somebody and she said, but I can do just about anything. I can do all of it. And I said, yeah, but maybe to get the conversation started, we need to start with one. and then move to the wider story, rather than you coming in as a ditzy and what happened to be female, as a ditzy female who can do everything and do nothing. I said, let's try and have some sympathy for the other person, that they needed that little bit more clarity to get the conversation started. So I do think sometimes we can get so goal driven, we can get very rigid. And I think that actually works against us.
I was thinking about that in the spiritual path as well, the path that we go on, and we have people who will come along for the walk, and sometimes we don't really know why they're there, and we kind of try and push them away. Actually, they would be allies if we would just let them. It's just that we have this idea that no, you're taking me off on a little tangent here, and I don't really want to go. That's true, isn't it, Tanys?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the other thing that came to mind with Mary's conversation is also about, when we're trying to manifest something like a goal, right? We don't always know what's best for us. So if we can let go and allow, sometimes we can be quite amazed at how much further or how much grander the end result is than what we actually could visualize. So we can't always visualize exactly what we need or where we want to go. So often when I'm talking with clients, I'm talking about, so think about where you want to go and then say, I want to go here or better. And then it allows that openness for more to come in if that's what's meant to be, and trusting that journey along the spiritual path is, I think that's an important part, because the guides know better than we do. They have
That's
greater
true.
knowledge. So in the spiritual path.
That is kind of weaving our limitations, weaving ourselves into a big cloth of limitations, and then not realizing that we're kind of sewing ourselves into a sack. But we also have the scissors and stuff to be able to get back out again. So this is kind of why we are all here, because we understand that and we can help people to do that. It's just how it's presented to them in a way sometimes. And it's we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we, Angela? About the belief, and are we actually choosing our own beliefs when we start out? Because we can't really choose our own beliefs when we start out. We have to actually live a life and go through all these, meeting these different people who are going to change our minds. And that's another one, changing minds. Because without changing your mind, you're not really going to grow, are you? I mean, we've changed careers, most of us, very much so, in many ways. And to do that, we've had to kind of change our mindset.
I think that the mindset thing, Leslie, is the way we think, the way we habitually behave, the way we act out, the way we show up. It's effectively who we are. Like, my mindset is this, and this is the way I turn up. This is what I think, etc., etc. And I've had to change that because it wasn't working well. I equate mindset to the operating system in your cell phone. It's the thing that makes it work. It makes the device work. And our mindset is what makes us, the device, work. And periodically your cell phone will beep and say, update. And you go, okay, fair enough. How often do we update what's going on in here? Our own operating system. And that's when we don't do that, we don't change it or update it or upgrade it, we stay exactly where we are, stuck.
And that updating system is kind of our learning process. That's how we update, is we learn something new.
Yeah, learning something new. I mean, I've come up with a little webinar that I'm going to be doing, which is basically your internal operating system or your mindset is responsible for everything that happens to you. Your thinking creates your reality, the results you get, the way your life turns out. And if you want your life to turn out differently or better or nicer or happier or whatever, and it's not happening just now, you're going to have to do something with that in there.
Yeah.
And not just think about it, actually put it into action.
Exactly.
Because it can beep as much as it like until you press the button to say go. Nothing's happening.
But interesting on that one, Leslie, how long can you get away with saying I'm not going to update this operating system on your phone before things start going wrong
Yeah.
and things don't run properly anymore, or that app won't work anymore? It's exactly the same with ourselves. If we're not constantly striving and constantly looking for ways of improving ourselves, and it could be as simple as going and getting a haircut or having something different to eat for your dinner. It doesn't have to be massively mind-blowing, but if we're not constantly looking for these different things of, okay, I'm going to do that differently today, or I'm going to try that, we do get stuck, we get stagnant, and things will stop working.
There are exercises that are very simple to do that. You can take a teaspoon and try and write down 10 things that you would do with a teaspoon that wouldn't normally be used for. Or take a different way to work. Don't just look at the Google Maps and follow, or that could be an adventure actually, particularly in Scotland. I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but particularly in Scotland, because Google doesn't know half of Scotland as far as I can see. But
Can't say I've had that issue, but there are other mapping apps available. But you could even just, when was the last time you tried to brush your teeth starting on the other side of your mouth? Or brush your teeth with the other hand? Even things like that can really challenge your thinking. It doesn't have to be massive.
There's the old Scottish phrase, Leslie, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got.
yeah.
You do things the same way, you'll get the same results. So the add-on to that would be, if you want different results, you've got to change something, as Angela
You've got to
said.
do something differently. And it wasn't Einstein who said that doing the same things all the time and expecting different results was a sign of madness?
Well, funny enough, I researched that from a webinar, and he didn't actually say that. These words are
Probably
attributed
not.
to him, and he didn't say it. But it's so ingrained in folklore now that everyone assumes, that Einstein thing about madness. But it has a validity. If you do the same thing over and over again, expecting it to come out differently, you are an idiot.
It's like going to see the same film again and again and again, expecting to see a different ending.
Quite.
Spoiler alert, the boat still sinks in Titanic. Doesn't matter how many times you go see it, it's going to still sink.
Yeah. And she doesn't get off that, let him on that board. Even although there's enough room.
That's a whole other conversation.
You spoiled that for me. I've never seen the movie.
Well, you don't have to now. That's why I like watching programs like Gogglebox and things like that, all these compilation programs, because you don't have to sit and go watch a whole program or anything like that. You can get a real good taste of what's there or not, and you can still stay in the conversation when somebody says something, and then yeah. Do you watch it? No. Don't watch. Drives people nuts, that one. Because it used to be the TV Times. I used to read the little things in the TV Times about what the programs were, and they'd all be talking about it in the tea room. And I'd say, "Oh yeah, and that's going to happen, and that's going to happen." How do you know? Did you watch it? No, don't watch it.
You just like to give spoilers.
Yeah, it's great fun.
But there is an interesting thing there about, if you want, I think we've all come across lots of people who want things to be different, but they're not changing anything they're doing. So I want to change career, or I want to feel more fulfilled, or I want to be, and what actions, what have you tried? No, haven't tried. What do you mean? Well, have you tried doing things differently? Have you ventured, have you joined a new club? Have you looked at your skill set? No. Have you applied for any jobs? I love the one. People who want a new job and they've never applied for another job. That's great fun having that
It's like people who complain about not winning the lottery and they don't buy a ticket.
Well, I'll do that one. But I think Mary, on that one, it's that point of there's got to be a balance. And when you're looking at, you were talking about planning, and there needs to be a ability for flex when you plan, but there needs to be a plan. And that plan could just be, I want a new job. And then from that, what are the action steps? So I'm going to get my CV up to date, and I'm going to apply for X number of jobs. And then from that, I am going to do this. That doesn't mean you can't do anything else. That doesn't mean you can't apply for X+2 jobs. It's just what is the minimum viable? What are you going to do as a minimum level to move you towards the person that you want to be, the life you want to live? Because if there's no form of planning and there's no form of dreaming, or however you want to word it, because a plan is just a dream written down. And it's just about what are you going to do to try and work towards that? And what are you going to do to start moving in that direction? And absolutely, if nothing changes and nothing changes, you can write it down. Unless you start putting steps in place to say, this is how I can get to that point. It's that bridging the gap. There's got to be some way of taking that moment to say, right, this is where I am, that's where I want to get to. Now, and that might be there, or it could be there, or a little bit further. But I want to get over this gap. What am I going to do to get there? And who do I need to come with me to support me on that journey, to encourage me, to keep me accountable, and to keep me moving in that direction and not running for the hills backwards? Because I know what's back there. I didn't like it. So how do I keep moving forwards?
You're talking about the quotes and stuff, and one that came to mind for me is the idea that we can't change a problem with the same level of thinking or the same mind that created the problem, right? And so in the very nature of wanting to address something that is uncomfortable, change is an inevitable aspect of it. We can't move forward or do something different if we're constantly thinking the same way, we're addressing something in the same fashion, right? And it's interesting because what came to mind as you were talking is this, you know, we get excited about certain things. Oh, we're going to go on this vacation. Oh, we're getting this new thing, right? This change that's happening in our lives or in our experience, and we get super, super excited about it, right? And then there's these other things that come in, and we get those, you know, those same kind of physiological responses in a certain way, but then there's this piece where we go, oh, but I don't, that one I don't like. I don't want to feel that one. I don't want to have that experience, right? But if we can look at it and go, you know, just because I anticipate something, that doesn't necessarily make it good. And just because I fear something, that doesn't necessarily make it bad, right? But being able to look at something and go, hey, I would like to bring this into my experience. Now, how do I do that in a way that is going to feel manageable, right? In a way that I feel like I can honor myself and have strength to move through it.
And how much of this fear is because of us wanting to be in control of the change? Because you mentioned purchasing a car as a change. That's true. And it's one that we look forward to. But if we have to purchase because we don't have the other one, and then we're not necessarily looking forward to it. So what's the, is it the fact that we don't have control over the change that creates the fear? Or is it that it's fear, it's the change itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
It's what's led up to requiring the change. So you could look at that as like you've got a new partner, so you're going to move in together, so you've got this excitement over looking for a new house, or you've just split up from a partner and you now need to separate and you now need to look for new houses. And it's the same thing, you're still looking for a place to live.
Yeah.
And you've got to go through the process of purchasing it and moving or renting it and all the rest of it. But the emotional aspect behind it is very, very different.
Yeah.
I think the uncertainty associated with change is a factor. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And we hold ourselves back because it's a bit scary. I'm not certain about that. Will I want to do it? No. So back to the uncertainty being another aspect of life, like death and taxes, because there is uncertainty. I used to be a bit of a control freak. I put my hands up. I wanted to make sure things worked, possibly down to the fact that I was a police officer and I had to make things work or resolve problems or get a particular result or outcome. And it took me a long time to learn to take my hands off the steering wheel and let go of the reins, and the old Hackney phrase, go with the flow. Right? but it was liberating. And I recommend it highly to anyone who's a bit of a control freak. Or another thing I was a perfectionist. Things had to be perfect. But I was told by someone who a lot of us know is that imperfect action is always better than perfect inaction. And I took that, right, okay, 80% will do me now, because if it gets the job done, fine. And it is very, very relaxing to adopt that mindset.
If we don't try too hard to not do anything and think about the double negatives that we use in life, I don't want to not do that, or I do want to not do that. Just understanding what it is that we want to happen. We all want to be a little bit more comfortable. We all want to be in a familiarity zone to a certain extent, but that allows the idea of familiarity is one thing. But don't we want a little bit of the unknown, which would spice it up a little bit? A lot of the times you get some people who don't eat any different foods because they don't think they'll like them, but they don't know because they never tried. And the surprise on people's faces when things happen. I mean, I am not unknown. It's not unknown for me to put things into my husband's meal that he already says he doesn't like, but he doesn't know they're in there. And then when he catches me putting them in and he starts to moan, I'll say, well, you ate it last time. Said it was wonderful. Can't go anywhere with that. But it's still something that, you know, he's one of these people who really doesn't like change that much. But as long as he doesn't understand, you know, it's under his radar, it will happen. Usually because I make it happen, but there you go. And it's one of those things that when we're talking about change for growth and growth for change, well, if it's inevitable, which it is, why not embrace it? Why not look and say, do you know what? This is going to happen. So I might as well go along for the ride. I might as well see what happens because, you know, it's better to be going with the flow than being stuck somewhere in a little side pocket of a river with nothing going on, watching the world go by and being bitter about it because nobody comes to see you. Because nobody knows you're there. You're not poking your head up above the parapet and saying, oh, what's going on? Is that interesting? Is that not interesting? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be massive. You know, nobody's saying that you should go out to somewhere and go and work with elephants or something like that, because that can be interesting if you want a big change. Oh, you never know what's going to happen with them. But at the same time, you do. Because sometimes we have the idea that we can use our intuition, we can use our knowledge, we can use that wealth of experience that we've got that says, yeah, I didn't try that the last time, but maybe I'll try it now because I'm a bit older, a bit wiser, or I'm still young enough to have a go. Change is a wonderful thing. It gives you more choice. And if you've got more choice, well then, you can keep the change.